So a lot of people ask me, Jeffrey, you're an expert on a lot of the NHL playoffs of the 1970s. What was the most one-sided playoff series of the decade? Well, this was a semifinal series in a 71-72 NHL season. And ironically, the series was so interesting. It was like this. Did you know that Bobby Orr did not score a goal in this series, despite Boston outscoring their opponents 26-8? Okay, that's a true story. Boston outscored them 16-3 at home and 12-5 on the road. So it's got to be the Boston Bruins, eventual Stanley Cup champions, against their survivors of probably one of the most exciting expansion 12 series of the modern era. Now, Minnesota had lost to St. Louis in 7 games in an upset. Minnesota had won game 2 in overtime, and St. Louis outlasted them in a very, very tough game 7 result 2-1 at the Met Center. But when Boston took on the St. Louis Blues, who were 3-time straight finalists before 68, 69, and 70. Boston had bet them in the 70 Stanley Cup Finals. It was no competition. Ironically, St. Louis led the opening game 1-0 on Gary Unger's fourth of the postseason. Before Fred Stanfield, Mike Walton, Johnny Busick, two by Stanfield in the second period, and one by Esposito in the third, allowed him to win 6-1. Now, ironically, Jacques Cano and Ernie Wakely weren't too bad that game. 38 shots, and the stop 30, 30 32 of them. So it was a pretty freaky set, as we like to say. 5 goals by Cano and one by Wakely in the third period. Now, game 2 was a blowout from the start. 10-2. Johnny Busick, Esposito, Westfall, and Garnet Bailey and Johnny McKenzie scored to give them a big 5-0 lead after the second period. Murphy and Roberto scored in the third period for St. Louis, but Busick again later shot a hat trick. Shaky got a goal. Don Marcotte and Eddie Westfall scored the second of the contests. Now, in game 3 in St. Louis, ironically, St. Louis had led 1-0 early before Eddie Westfall, Johnny McKenzie, Espo, Shaky, Ken Hodge, McKenzie again, Shaky again, scored. They scored 3 goals in the first period, 2 in the second, and another 3 in the second, and another 2 in the third, with Gary Sabrin running out the scoring for St. Louis with a late counter to make it 7-2. Now, ironically, Peter McDuffie, the third goalie that St. Louis used in the series, wasn't too bad, stopping 31-38. Now, game 4 was quite interesting as well. Terry Crisp scored late to make it 2-1 for Boston. Busick had another 2 goals, 3 straight power play counters by Boston. Now, in the third period, he made it close with Andre Dupont and Chris Evans scoring before Wayne Cashman scored in 1922 to round out the scoring. Now, to me, it's kind of ironic. Again, Bobby Orr not scoring in the whole series. And, he had some good power play chances. So, again, Carol Wakely and Peter McDuffie playing for St. Louis. But that was a big series. I watched the Nesson highlights of the series to do this podcast. Boys, Boston was awful efficient. You give them a power play chance, they would take it. Now, in game 1, 2 power play goals for Boston. In game 2, 3 power play counters. Game 3, 1 shorthanded and 2 power play counters, and of course 3 power play scores in the final game. Now, it's kind of weird how it went, ladies and gentlemen. They weren't running up the score at all. They were just making the most of their chances. And the Nesson announcer said in a very ironic comment, he said, well, defense is not St. Louis's priority or their best game. But to see a young Andre Dupont scored, see a young Mike Murphy score, a young Terry Crisp, St. Louis had some talent in on that squad. Just they couldn't. And this was the shaky Walton kind of Johnny McKenzie team. I say that with Ed Westfall, second and third and fourth line. But Fred Stanfield again, what a pickup. They got him for nothing pretty much in that trade. But see, Johnny Busick and Marcotte as well scoring brings a lot of back of good memories. So if you can find it on YouTube against the Nesson, it's a whole series of games from the 71-72 season. It also looks at the Toronto team, which was, not that bad that year. They took Boston to 5 games. But St. Louis, again, this was a team that was in the wilderness after a while. This wasn't Gary Unger's team at the time. Later on it was. And let me tell you something, ladies and gentlemen. Boston, I still think that 72 Boston team was better than 1970 because it was a more balanced attack. They literally had 4 lines, and with Eddie Johnson and Gary Cheevers sharing the goalie, And ladies and gentlemen, the Rangers gave Boston everything they can handle in that final, especially in Game 1 where they came back with the big deficit, and almost won that contest. So, ladies and gentlemen, Jacques Caron, McDuffie, Ernie Wakely, they had my respect, but Boston could have scored another 5-6 goals because St. Louis, literally with the Plaguers, too much emphasis on that. They didn't really have a strong defense to work with. But, tremendous to watch the old highlights because with no names in the back, it's kind of freaky because, the beautiful hairstyles like Derek Sanderson as well. And what's kind of freaky about this, ladies and gentlemen, Derek Sanderson never scored in that series at all either. So it was, like I said, pretty freaky. I've always been wondering how come you let Eddie Westfall go to the Islanders. You had a few good years left in Boston. If you would have tried to keep him, and again, Westfall, McKenzie, Shaky Walton, Kenny Hodge, Marcotte, Espo, Wayne Cashman only scored in what a talented team. What a talented team at every level. And Fred Stanfield went one of the most underrated players in Boston history. So that's for my review of the very interesting semifinal, Final Four in 1972 involving the Bruins and the Blues. And it's hard to believe, but Toronto gave them a better shake than St. Louis did in that season. I tell you why. Toronto scoring in overtime in Game 2, that series was tied there, right? And, the next 3 games were only decided by 2 goals. And I think that's why he rushed Bernie Perron out of town, because he gave up a little bit of cheap goals in that series. But that's a podcast for another time. Thanks for listening, and don't forget, if you like what we're doing here, we're a Boston Bruin review podcast. Let us know with a like, comment, subscribe, or share. But the Nesson archives that are available on YouTube, it's quite interesting because when Boston would score, it was a big announcing, but when Boston would give up a goal, it was so quiet. The announcers didn't even want to mention it. Thanks for listening. Give us a like, comment, subscribe, or share. And as we like to say on the North Shore of New Brunswick, keep your stick in the ice. Bye.